I'd just like to say spasibo большое to Pavel at Ladder Power for letting us use video clips from their YouTube channel.
Right then guys, hello and welcome back to the channel. Today's password is Voda mokraya. Got that? Voda mokraya. Okay, right. If you know certain games, then you'll know. If you watch their film, then this is very relevant. If not, don't worry about it, okay? Right, so my missus is Ukrainian, yeah, and she comes up with some really nice dishes. This one's a Ukrainian special, and she brought some seeds back from the Ukraine, and I don't quote me on what the name of it is in Russian, but she told me that she'd planted some and she'd made a dish, and we tried it, and I thought, wow, yeah, great, this is absolutely gorgeous. Now, it's sorrel, yes, I don't know if you've heard of that. It also has a lot of oxalic acid in it. It's cruciferous, and it grows wild in quite a lot of places, especially in the UK, temperate areas like America as well, and it can be foraged, yes. So she didn't know this, so she brought some seeds back from the Ukraine because they don't sell it in the shops here, or it's hard to find at least, and she's grown her own so she can make a Ukrainian dish which is absolutely gorgeously delicious. Now, anybody who's been to the Ukraine or Russia might recognize this dish. It's just one of these things, and it's living more closer to the land by using stuff that you can get hold of. The fresh plant itself has a lemony, strange lemony taste to it, yeah, and it does contain a lot of oxalic acid in it, yeah, surprisingly, yeah, so you need to drink or consume some citric acid with it to clear out any of the effects of oxalic acid, yeah. But that's the one thing, and I learned this recently, yeah, because we Googled it, Russian name to English name, and it's like, wow, okay, yeah, I get you. See where you're coming from. Yeah, you can find that in quite a few places. So we're going foraging looking for that, yeah. Now, I live in Norfolk, and Norfolk has a speciality because around the King's Lynn area we have the Wash and salt flats, marsh flats, yeah, and samphire grows there. That's this green stuff here, yeah, you see this? This is a delicacy. It's called the poor man's asparagus, or it's called sea asparagus, which is very nutritional. Now, it only grows at certain times of the year, June and July, so it's a delicacy for us, and it's very expensive if you buy it in the shops elsewhere. It can be grown in greenhouses, but it's not the same. It doesn't have the same nutrients in it, but it is absolutely delicious. And of course, once you know about it and you happen to be maybe holidaying in Norfolk, or you happen to be here at that time of the year, you can always ask for it and you can find it. Yes, okay, and if you know where to find it on salt flats, then it's free of charge. Yeah, so that's another foraging thing for you to just keep in the back of your head, because all this information could be useful to you. Yeah, so now I'm going to talk about the project, which is the main thing, which is connected to my wife and the Ukraine as well, okay, and the password Voda mokraya, okay. Right then guys, this is about the project vehicle, or potential project vehicle. Now, first I'll explain a little bit of my history. I lived in the Ukraine for about 4 years, so I got a taste, a life there. The place actually went through a decline, economic collapse, because the Soviet Union pulled out, and I learned a lot, maybe about prepping, maybe about just living, okay, in a different way, yeah. Now, we travelled from the Ukraine, or should I say from the UK to the Ukraine, backwards and forwards after my wife actually came to the UK, and we tried all sorts of vehicles. LDV was actually the best. That coped with the roads better than a Land Rover Discovery, believe it or not. I had a lot of trouble with the Land Rover Discovery, and I had a channel, which is still actually there, I went and found it the other day, on YouTube, and made a little series about the cruel road. Yeah, so there's 3 parts, 3 videos, and I explain about the roads and stuff like that. Plus there's a few extras there as well if you're interested in the Ukraine. Just to give you an idea how rough these roads are, you can hear the banging, the suspension, and the bump stops hitting the axle quite often.
If it isn't that, then it's the tyre rims hitting potholes. There's just thousands of miles of really bad road, and then suddenly you'll hit a very good piece of road, and then it goes back to being bad again and rough. If it isn't that, then you're stuck behind lorries with thousands of speeding Ukrainians trying to overtake all in one go. It's actually very dangerous. We've just got a smooth bit of road here for a little while. You can feel the bumps have gone, and then they come back again.
But basically the emphasis is if there is a prolonged economic decline, the roads are not going to get looked after, so you need vehicles that will cope with it. And of course the Ukrainians, they are very good at coping and adapting. You'll be surprised actually how well they survive with normal things. Yeah. So it was Bob actually. Bob, you put a comment on the one video, and I went and had a look at a video of the Lada Niva. Yeah. And I forgot all about it until I'd seen that video, and I thought, actually, yeah, that thing is a little goat in itself. It's a lightweight 4x4 vehicle, and it has a longitudinal setup for engine gearbox. Plus it has a separate transfer box from the gearbox.
Just to emphasise what I'm saying here, I'll just give you a quick look at this Iveco, which is a heavyweight flatbed utility vehicle. Okay, so you have the engine which is mounted longitudinally. If it was transverse, it would mean that the drive shafts would be driving the front axle, but what we have here is a standard Iveco gearbox, okay, engine gearbox. Prop shaft then goes to transfer box, okay, and then from the transfer box it can then operate the front and rear axles. Yep, so you can have your high-low ratios and all that in that transfer box, okay.
That is a good configuration for a 4x4 to repair it, because if you have issues with your transmission, if you've got a Land Rover, that's a very heavy unit which you have to split, and of course Land Rovers do suffer from problems mating the transfer box to the gearbox. So you can't just use any gearbox, you've got to use a Land Rover gearbox if you were going to do any modifications, okay, which limits your ability to be able to modify a vehicle, okay. Transverse engine vehicles, front wheel drive vehicles, are very hard to actually adapt because of the way the drive shafts are set. Is possible, but front to back engines or longitudinal engines are a lot easier to do, and that's what the Lada Niva actually has, okay. I've got to say thanks very much to the Lada Power team. I did ask them to use some video material from their YouTube site so I could show you what I'm talking about. Now, I spent a good day watching these videos and trying to understand how the Lada was put together, or how the Niva was put together, what type of bearings they have in the front wheel drive section, where the diffs are, if the diffs can be stripped out, where the transmission is, what type of engine it's got, as well as what modifications can be done to it. And there are quite a few that can be done, and you can jack them up. What I do like is the 4-point suspension linkage, which you have on that as standard on the rear axle, and it's independent front suspension, which gives it a lot more articulation. Land Rovers, they have an A-frame, a bit like a daft truck actually, or most trucks, which limit its travel unless you modify it. Okay, so yeah, so with the Lada Niva, the transmission, if for instance you had engine gearbox go, you could put something in like a Ford Transit engine and gearbox, a normal one from a commercial vehicle, longitudinal. It has a prop shaft flange on the back. You can put that into place, link up the prop shafts, and then you're good to go in a situation if you had a transmission or engine failure. Yeah, that's worst case scenario. Or if you wanted to modify something to turn it from a petrol engine to a diesel engine. Yeah, this is the way I think, because I used to own Land Rovers and I've got quite a few videos on my other channel which will show you about repairs if you're interested, and I'll also leave a link below. But it's one of those things, it's a heavy vehicle, whereas the Niva isn't. Now, they are very basic. They don't have the same ECU setups as most Western vehicles. In fact, It's turnkey and there is no clipper to open the doors, so there's no central locking. That's one thing out of the way. It's not scattered with ECUs all over it, which can be a problem in itself with electronic diagnosis. If you can't get ECUs, for instance, that makes it even harder to do. Yeah, so the most I'd want on a vehicle is an ECU and an engine. Okay, ECU management for the engine, or PCI or ECM, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, power control module is PCI or PCM. Yeah, and that you can either have modified, or you can have repaired, or you can find another one and have it adapted. Whereas if you've got lots of ECUs across a vehicle, that makes it much harder. And of course, if you have something like an EMP hit your vehicle, then you're going to lose it, aren't you? Yeah, or potentially you could lose it. Yeah, if you lose your keys, or your flipper, or your battery goes flat, then you can't get in your vehicle. Whereas with the Lada Niva, you just turn the lock and open it, don't you? Yeah, the vehicle's fairly lightweight as well, and this is what I'm attracted to, and it's very good off-road. And the cost of it as well, which when you look brand new, you can buy them in the UK ready for £17,000 plus VAT for a basic model. That's imported and it's already had an IVA on it. If you want to go down the route of IVAing it yourself, which is taking it to a test station, treating it like a kit car, they go through it, see the specs are all right, and then they will give you registration on that to say it's okay to use in the UK. Yeah. Now that's actually cheaper, but in the long run it might not be, because IVAs are very expensive to do. Yeah. The other option is, because some of our family are in the Ukraine, is to go over there and get some things done on that vehicle, buy one over there and get a vehicle and get some things done on it and drive it back. And there are, and this is the Lada Power YouTube site, you can see the modified vehicle. It lends itself to being modified quite sensibly as well. Okay, now what I'm looking at is LPG conversion on it, and from new, if I bought it in the UK, would be £1,000 according to I sent him a message, this guy Mark, and he said, yeah, that's £1,000 factory fitted. Yeah, so Russians, Ukrainians use LPG quite considerably because it's a cheaper fuel. It's cheaper to get hold of, and what they do is they take tanker trailers, they leave them on garage forecourts, and you can fill up LPG straight off. Yeah, here obviously it's a little bit different, but it's still cheaper. Unfortunately, it has a lower calorific value, which means you don't get so much power to it as you do petrol, for instance. The other option is later on is to change it for a diesel engine. It's possible, and get more power out of it. It's a four-wheel drive. It sucks power because you're turning two axles. Yeah, you're sending power from the gearbox to the transfer box out to the diffs, and of course that will all soak up power. Yeah, so it's a noisy vehicle. It's a Spartan noisy vehicle at the end of the day to drive. And yes, I have sat in one, but didn't pay much attention to it because I've experienced quite a lot of different Russian made vehicles, and after owning a Land Rover, it makes very little difference anyway, doesn't it? Yeah, so there are of course modifications to do. So this is what I'm looking at in general, and of course you can have the big wheels, you can have the flared arches and the lift kit as well as having tools and diffs in it, which that lends itself to having done fairly cheaply as well. Okay. The parts, unfortunately, now this is the downside of owning a vehicle, is getting the parts for it. That's either Russia or the Ukraine. Now the Lada Power crew, they have a website and you can order those, and it takes about 2 weeks to get bits from the Ukraine. We know this because we send parcels over to the Ukraine. Their man in a van goes over it and then he comes back again, so that's like the postal service to and from. Yeah, which of course, being a mechanic, if I needed to make a prop shaft up, I can do it. Yeah, I can also source wheel bearings and things like that. That isn't really a problem. That's not the problem, and the parts are quite cheap for Ladas. The other downside to it, it has a big engine. It's a 1700 petrol engine, and there are no other variants. I think it's a 1600. And that means that it is a juicy vehicle to run. I think the urban cycle on that is something like 20 miles to the gallon, which isn't brilliant at all. But Of course, with modification LPG, we can bring the cost of fuel down, okay? If it's multi-fuel, all the better, and I'm pretty sure there must be a way of running paraffin through that vehicle as well, some way, if you guys know about petrol paraffin turnover. I have talked about this on a video on my other channel. I started to talk about the adaptability of petrol engines, and of course MPI, which is multi-point injection. That's not as good as having a carburetted engine, but of course then the emissions are different. Yeah, so this is something to look into a bit more. Now I have a I have a brother-in-law in St. Petersburg in Russia. I have sort of hinted towards, with the wife, towards going over there and having a look first of all in its natural habitat. Yeah, just to remind myself, because there are other Russian 4x4s that do ours, isn't there? And there's the Patriot as well, which is pretty capable 4x4. Petrol's quite cheap in Russia, and gas is even cheaper. But to buy something there and to drive it back, I'd have to go through Lithuania, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Germany, and over here, which could cause problems in itself. Registering and insuring a vehicle from the continent is a little bit different from buying a vehicle here and having cheaper insurance. So, going to balance all of these things out. It is looking that way. Or I want something close to that. I know you're probably thinking, oh, that's all Russian stuff. Yeah, you're a Russian lover, blah blah blah. Well, yeah, actually, I love the principle. I love the principle of it. Yeah, because we are losing all of these vehicles now. Everything is becoming samolux, or luxury, as they say. Yeah. And you're losing a lot of the benefits of being Spartan. Spartan is durable for a prepping situation, and a guy of my age who doesn't really want to mess about with electronics. Yeah, so that's just my 10 pence worth at the moment. I don't know how this is going to pan out, because there's only another 2 years. 2023. On the 31st of December at 12 o'clock, that is it. After then, they won't be producing it, because I think that's going out of production. It's going out of production in Russia, although there will be second-hand ones available there. There are second-hand ones available in the UK, but they are very expensive, very expensive. It's like owning a Land Rover Defender. It has a little bit of a cult following, yeah. Whereas I don't look at it that way. I'm looking for something very practical, okay, that's adaptable and can be modified with anything. Yeah, and believe me, if you've got a vehicle that lays itself out longitudinally, you can go to a scrapyard and pull out an engine, gearbox, and modify it to fit into a vehicle like that. Yes? Yeah, you agree with me, don't you? You know anyway, don't you? You sit there, listen to me, because you just know what I'm talking about. But some of you guys don't know. This is a journey that I went through for actually quite a few years of my life, modifying vehicles and fitting different engines to things, mainly in the Land Rover brand, or finding what would fit from the LDV to the Land Rover, because they came from the same stables. Yeah, and there was a time where Land Rover engines were used in taxis, they were used in vans, and they were used in Land Rovers, and it was all the same block and the same gearbox, so you could get away with, if you had to, getting all that stuff and putting it together. But now they've broken it up, because they don't really want you to do that. They don't want you to do that. They don't want you to modify vehicles. Yeah, but we may have to in the future. We may have to. But of course, I talked to my other channel. That's the last thing I'm going to talk about, is about JCB and the hydrogen powered engine. Now, these are not fuel cells. This is an internal combustion engine that it's a diesel engine that JCB have modified with a different cylinder head and a different fuel system to run on hydrogen gas. Okay, so that is like LPG, but it has more calorific value according to the video I was watching. Now I'm watching this space because if it's available to get retrofit engines from JCB, then we're on to a winner. We can avoid this electric vehicle thing, can't we? Yeah, because I do like the internal combustion engine. Yeah, you don't have to have a plug-in power point in a car park that's miles away from your house, do you? Yeah. Anyway, all right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.